You don't belong in first class. Take the bread and be grateful." The words cracked across the cabin like a slap. Heads turned, suits smirked. A single slice of bread and a glass of water sat on the tray in front of Marcus Reed, as if humiliation could be plated and served. He didn't blink. He didn't raise his voice. He just ended his call with 2 words: "Stand by." The hum of the engines carried on, but the air in seat 1 ampere had shifted. The flight attendant's practiced smile faltered as a low ripple of laughter spread from the back of the cabin. A man in a navy tie leaned to his seatmate, stage whispering, "Economy looks more his style." The whisper was meant to be private. It wasn't. Marcus remained still, cream-colored blazer crisp under the cabin lights, phone resting easy in his palm. To anyone else, he looked like a quiet consultant, an unimportant man given the wrong seat. To those who would soon learn, he was the reason the airline was still in the sky. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. The tray in front of him, a mockery of first-class dining, wasn't the insult. The insult was the smirk that delivered it, the laughter that followed, the presumption that his silence meant submission. He sat anchored to his seat, gaze steady, letting the storm build around him. 5 minutes later, the same crew laughing at him would be stripped of their wings. But for now, the only sound was the faint clink of ice in crystal glasses and the slow unraveling of dignity at 38,000 feet. Marcus Reed stayed still, his tray a silent insult in polished silver. Bread and water where a 4-course meal should have been. The cabin lights glowed soft and golden, but the atmosphere was anything but warm. A woman across the aisle leaned toward her husband, whispering, "They don't check everyone's ticket, do they?" He chuckled, eyes never leaving Marcus. The flight attendant hovered, arms crossed like a gatekeeper. "Sir, if you're unhappy, economy has plenty of options, but this is first class." Her tone wasn't service. It was judgment wrapped in a uniform. Marcus's jaw didn't tighten. His hands didn't move. Only his eyes lifted calm, deliberate, cutting through her performance. He'd seen this scene before. 20 years earlier, when he wore his first tailored suit to a job interview at a regional airline, the hiring manager had said, "Not the image we're looking for." He hadn't forgotten. He never would. From row 3, a red recording light blinked. A young passenger angled his phone toward the tray, the bread, the humiliation playing out in real time. "This is wild," he whispered. Beside him, another passenger hissed, "Careful, you'll get kicked off." But the lens kept rolling. At the galley, a trainee froze. Her name tag read, Mia. She had scanned Marcus's boarding pass herself, saw the green check, knew it was valid. Her lips parted, but fear caught the words before they reached air. Her eyes flicked to the torn paper crumpled on the floor, the meal voucher the attendant had ripped without a blink. The cabin manager arrived then, tall, polished, voice rehearsed. "We don't tolerate disruptions. If you can't comply, you'll be escorted to coach or removed entirely." Gasps flickered through the cabin. The smirks grew louder. A man in a tailored navy suit raised his glass, sneering, "Send him back where he belongs." Marcus finally shifted, slow and measured, pulling his phone closer. His voice barely above a whisper, but enough to slice through the noise. "Stand by for escalation." No raised tone, no frantic gestures, just the calm of a man who knew exactly what storm he was about to unleash. The manager smirked, mistaking patience for weakness. "Sir, last chance. Either accept what we offer, or you'll be escorted off this flight." Marcus leaned back, blazer catching the cabin light. His silence said what words didn't. This wasn't his last chance. It was theirs. The moment stretched thin, like the air before a storm. Marcus's tray still sat untouched bread growing stale, water trembling against the rim with each vibration of the engines. The cabin manager didn't blink, standing tall in the aisle as if authority alone could erase the insult already witnessed. Then came the escalation. Nicole, the senior attendant who had delivered the bread, leaned down close enough for the rows behind to hear. "You're not a real first-class passenger. Don't make me call security." Her words were sharp, designed not just to dismiss but to humiliate. From row 3, the young man with the phone lifted his camera higher. "They're really doing this," he muttered. His seatmate whispered back, "Keep filming." The red light blinked steady, proof stacking second by second. Mia, the trainee, stepped forward, nerves betraying her hands. I scanned his ticket, she said, voice low but audible. It was valid. Green check. The manager turned his head slowly, glare cutting through her courage. Step back, trainee. You're not authorized to intervene. Mia froze, swallowing hard, her truth suspended in the air like contraband. Laughter rose from a pair of platinum-status passengers sipping champagne. One of them, a man with silver hair and a tailored vest, smirked. Seen this before. They sneak in with fake passes every time. Looks about right, doesn't it? He said it loudly, like a toast, inviting the cabin to join in his prejudice. Marcus didn't move. His silence wasn't surrender, it was calculation. At 27, a bank manager had accused him of laundering money when he deposited his first 7-figure check. At 34, a hotel clerk had asked him to step aside while real guests checked in. Those scars didn't fade. They sharpened. And now, at 48, they steadied him in a cabin that had mistaken him for powerless. Nicole snatched the crumpled meal voucher from the floor, held it high, then tore it clean down the middle. The sound echoed louder than the engines. "Fraud doesn't get fed first class," she announced. Gasps scattered across the rows. One woman near the window clutched her pearls. A man whispered, "She really said that?" The tension didn't just hang, it spread, filling every row, pressing down like gravity. Marcus finally lifted his phone again. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Proceed to protocol. Log the incident. Every word." On the other end, his assistant's reply was immediate, crisp. "Understood, sir." Documentation started. Standing by. The cabin didn't know it yet, but the balance of power had already shifted. Every insult, every torn slip of paper, every word of dismissal, they were no longer private. They were evidence. And Marcus Reed was no ordinary passenger. He was the storm they had just summoned. Nicole's declaration still hung in the air. Fraud doesn't get fed first class. The words weren't just heard. They were absorbed, etched into the atmosphere like a verdict. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some leaning back, others leaning in, waiting for the man in 1 ampere to break. But Marcus Reed didn't break. He sat anchored, his posture steady, eyes forward, as if the weight of their prejudice could not penetrate the calm he wore like armor. His silence wasn't absence. It was presence, and it unsettled them more than anger ever could. The cabin manager doubled down. "Mr. Reed, if that is your real name, you have exactly one option. Take the seat quietly, or you will be escorted to economy. Security can meet us when we land." His tone was flat, but his jaw tightened, betraying a flicker of doubt. Mia, the trainee, clutched the edge of a seat, her face pale. "Sir, I told you, his ticket scanned green. It was legitimate." Her words cracked with nerves, but they carried. Passengers turned, phones tilted. Nicole snapped her head around, eyes sharp. "Stay out of this, Mia. You're here to serve, not to speak." Marcus finally moved, slow and deliberate. He lowered his phone into his lap, the screen still glowing. His voice came low, controlled. "Every escalation has been logged. Continue, and it won't just be this flight under review." The silver-haired passenger sneered, lifting his champagne flute like a weaponized accessory. "Listen to him threatening staff because he doesn't like his bread and water. Classic." He chuckled, but no one joined. The laughter that had once rippled so easily was faltering now, replaced with an uneasy murmur. A woman in row 5 leaned out into the aisle, phone raised. "This isn't about a meal. This is about respect." Her voice trembled, but her conviction didn't. Nicole barked back. "Ma'am, please stay seated. We have protocol." Protocol. That word polished, bureaucratic, hollow, Marcus had heard it before. At 23, when his bank account was frozen after his first real estate commission. At 36, when a boardroom tried to lock him out of a deal he had built from the ground up. Protocol was always the shield, the excuse, the mask for bias. Now, at 48, he was done with masks. Marcus leaned back, blazer catching the light, and spoke clearly enough for the cabin to hear. "You called me a fraud in a seat I paid for. You tore up my voucher in front of witnesses. And you think silence means consent. It doesn't. It means I've given you every chance to reveal yourselves. And you did." The cabin stilled. Even the engines felt muted. Nicole's smirk faltered. The manager's arms stiffened at his sides. Mia's eyes widened, not in fear but in recognition. They thought they had contained him. But the truth was already escaping, flowing down the aisle, captured in cameras, etched into memory. Marcus Reed hadn't raised his voice once, and yet the cabin no longer belonged to them. It belonged to him. The silence in the first-class cabin was suffocating, broken only by the steady hum of engines and the faint clink of glasses from passengers too nervous to sip. Marcus Reed hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, yet the balance of power had shifted 1 inch at a time. From the corner, a passenger cleared his throat. Keith Daniels, mid-30s, entrepreneur type, his phone angled discreetly toward the scene. The red recording light glowed like a warning flare. Nicole spotted it instantly. "Put that away," she snapped. "Recording crew procedures is prohibited." Keith didn't flinch. "This isn't procedure. This is humiliation." His voice carried, not loud, but sharp enough to slice through the tension. Several heads turned, passengers now openly watching instead of pretending not to. Mia, still trembling at the galley, stepped forward again. "He's right," she said, her voice steadier this time. "His boarding pass was real. I scanned it myself. He belongs here." The words landed heavier than she expected. For the first time, Marcus's eyes shifted toward her. Calm, measured, almost protective. The cabin manager stiffened. "Trainee, one more word and you'll be reported." His tone cracked at the edges, a fissure forming in his control. Nicole leaned closer to Marcus, her whisper cruel but loud enough for rows 2 and 3 to catch. "Men like you never last up here. Enjoy it while you can." Gasps scattered like sparks. A woman near the window dropped her fork against porcelain. A father traveling with his teenage son shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable." Marcus didn't rise to the bait. He simply tapped his phone once more, his assistant's voice filling the quiet. "Documentation ongoing, Mr. Reed." Language flagged. Incident timestamped. The words weren't just information, they were evidence, echoing across the aisle like an indictment. Nicole's face drained of color, but the manager pressed forward, desperate to regain control. "Enough games. Security will meet us in Los Angeles. Until then, you stay quiet or you're restrained." His words were meant to intimidate, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Then came the shift. A woman in row 5, the one who had spoken earlier, stood fully now. "No," she said firmly. "He's done nothing wrong. You served him bread and water and called him a fraud. We all saw it." Her phone was raised high, recording. "The world will see it too." Marcus didn't ask for her defense, but he didn't refuse it either. He turned slightly, gaze sweeping the cabin, his silence inviting others to decide where they stood. And slowly, they did. One by one, murmurs rose into clarity. She ripped up his voucher. "I heard her call him a fraud. That's not procedure, that's prejudice." For the first time, Nicole and the cabin manager looked smaller than their uniform suggested. The cabin wasn't just watching now, it was judging. Marcus remained still, anchored as ever. He didn't need to shout, because the voices rising around him had already begun to dismantle the illusion of control. The storm wasn't his alone anymore, it was theirs. The murmurs grew into something heavier, a current that neither polished uniforms nor forced smiles could dam. Nicole's jaw tightened, but her voice came out louder, sharper, like volume could drown out truth. "Enough. This passenger is attempting to defraud the airline. Security will be notified immediately." The cabin manager backed her up, his stance rigid. "For the record," he announced as if in a courtroom, "this man has refused compliance, disrupted service, and presented questionable documentation. That will be noted in the incident report." The words hung like a gavel strike, but they didn't land clean. Instead, they cracked the air wide open. Keith raised his phone higher. "Refused compliance? He hasn't even moved. You tore his voucher in half and called him a fraud. That's what we're recording." The passengers around him nodded, some murmuring agreement. One man near the bulkhead muttered, "I paid for this seat too. If they did that to me, I'd be furious." Mia couldn't hold back anymore. She stepped into the aisle, her voice shaking but unmistakable. "You're lying," she said, staring at the manager. "I scanned his ticket. It was valid. His name lit up green. He belongs here." Her words cracked like glass, and the silence that followed was heavier than the engines outside. Nicole spun on her heel, face flushed. "You're done, Mia. Trainees don't get to challenge command." But Mia didn't step back. Her hands trembled, yet her eyes locked on Marcus. "I won't lie for you. she whispered. A ripple of shock ran through the cabin. The woman in row 5 stood taller, her camera steady. You hear that? Even your own crew says he's legit. More phones tilted upward, more red lights glowing. Evidence multiplied with every second. Marcus finally leaned forward, placing both hands lightly on the armrests. His voice came out calm, deliberate, a blade sheathed in velvet. You accused me of fraud without proof. You tore up my voucher in front of witnesses. You silenced your own staff when they told the truth, and you think protocol will protect you. His gaze swept the aisle, pausing on Nicole, then the manager. It won't, M crowed. The cabin manager's smirk faltered, his voice dropping half an octave. Sir, threats against crew are a federal offense. But it sounded less like law and more like desperation. Marcus didn't blink. I haven't threatened anyone. I've simply told the truth. The only crime here is arrogance. A hush fell, broken only when a man in a gray suit near the window scoffed. Oh, please. If he really belonged here, he'd prove it. Show us your history. Show us your account. Otherwise, this is theater. Marcus's lips curved. No smile, just the faintest signal of recognition. He had heard this refrain before, in banks, in hotels, in boardrooms. Prove you deserve to exist here. He didn't rise. He didn't defend. He simply let the tension thicken, the witnesses speak, the evidence mount, because the reveal was coming. And when it landed, it wouldn't just silence the cabin, it would dismantle it. The gray-suited passenger's challenge lingered in the aisle like smoke. Show us your history. Otherwise, this is theater. His smirk carried the weight of a dare, the arrogance of someone convinced the game was already won. Nicole folded her arms, emboldened. Exactly. If you're legitimate, prove it right now. Open your account, your records show everyone here who you really are. The cabin manager nodded firmly, feeding the illusion of control. This is standard verification, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. If you have nothing to hide, you'll comply. Marcus Reed sat motionless, eyes steady. He'd heard these words before. At 26, when a loan officer rejected his collateral as untrustworthy. At 31, when he'd been asked to explain the source of every dollar in his account before being allowed to purchase property. And now, at 48, in first class at 38,000 feet, the same demand was wrapped in a uniform and protocol. Around him, passengers shifted uneasily. Phones tilted higher. One woman whispered, "They're asking him to prove he's human." Another man muttered, "This is ugly." Marcus didn't raise his voice. Instead, he reached for his phone, his thumb brushing the screen with deliberate calm. "Carla," he said softly, his words carrying further than their volume should have allowed. "Move to phase 2. Escalate to compliance. Capture every phrase, every accusation, every denial." On the other end, his assistant's voice came crisp and unwavering. "Already in motion, sir. Corporate compliance has live access. Records are being logged." Nicole's confidence cracked for just a moment, but the gray-suited passenger filled the silence. "He's bluffing. People like him always bluff until someone asks for numbers." He leaned back smugly, swirling his drink. Keith, still holding his phone, finally spoke louder. "Or maybe he doesn't owe us anything. Maybe the problem isn't his proof, it's your prejudice." His words hit like a stone tossed into still water rippling through the cabin. Mia found her courage again. "He doesn't need to prove himself. I scanned the ticket. He belongs in that seat more than any of you." Nicole snapped, her voice breaking under strain. "Quiet. This is crew business." But no one was quiet anymore. The murmurs had become voices. "You tore his voucher. You called him a fraud. You ignored your own staff." The cabin was no longer united against Marcus. It was splintering. Witnesses were stepping forward not with fists, but with phones, with words, with truth. Marcus finally leaned back, blazer catching the dim light, his face unreadable. "You demand proof," he said, his voice even, calm, cutting. "But I don't owe this room my identity. The question isn't who I am. The question is why you think you have the right to decide who belongs." The air thickened. The challenge was no longer his, it was theirs. And for the first time, Nicole didn't have an answer. The cabin manager's face flushed, his authority fraying thread by thread. "That's enough," he barked, his voice cracking over the intercom as he pressed the call button. "Attention crew. Unauthorized passenger in first class. Stand by for removal upon landing." Gasps swept through the rows. Phones tilted higher, catching every word, every flicker of panic on his face. Nicole squared her shoulders, doubling down. "You heard the captain's crew alert," she said loudly, as if volume could mask the unraveling. "This man is a fraud. He will be escorted off." But the weight of her words no longer commanded silence. Keith called out from row 3, phone steady in his hand. "No, what we just heard is false. He hasn't done a thing. You're lying into the intercom now, and it's recorded." Passengers stirred. A woman in pearls leaned toward her teenage son, whispering, "They're digging their own grave." Another man shook his head. "They don't realize who they're dealing with." Mia stepped forward again, this time her voice louder, firmer. "Stop this. I saw the system myself. His name is valid. His seat is valid. And you're making it worse every second." Nicole spun on her, eyes blazing. "One more word and you're finished." But Mia didn't retreat. She stood taller, her trembling gone. "Then fire me," she said, voice steady. "I won't be complicit in this." The words hung like a blade in the aisle. Gasps spread again, but this time they weren't directed at Marcus. They were aimed squarely at the crew. Marcus hadn't moved. He didn't need to. His phone remained in his hand, his presence radiating calm authority. He'd seen this moment coming, the point when arrogance turns to desperation, when masks crack under the weight of witnesses. His voice, low but steady, broke the silence. "Carla, escalate further. Lock the timeline. Prepare authorization." The reply came crisp, immediate. "Understood, sir. Everything is secured. Awaiting your signal." The crew didn't understand yet, but the passengers were beginning to. This wasn't an ordinary traveler. This was someone holding the storm in his hands, and he was almost ready to release it. Nicole opened her mouth to retort, but Marcus was already rising, slow, deliberate, his movements carrying more weight than any raised voice could. The bread and water tray remained untouched at his seat, a monument to the insult that had started it all. His phone lowered, his gaze lifted, calm, focused. Every syllable came precise, aimed like a scalpel. "You've demanded proof. You've called me a fraud. You've threatened removal. So let me save you the trouble." The cabin stilled. Even the gray-suited passenger leaned forward, curiosity edging into unease. Marcus straightened his blazer, then spoke the words that cracked the tension in two. "I am Marcus Reed, Chief Executive Officer, majority shareholder of this airline, and you just tried to strip me of service in a cabin I own." Gasps erupted, sharp and collective. A champagne glass clinked to the floor. Phones angled higher, capturing not just the words but the faces of Nicole and the manager, drained of color. Keith whispered into his phone camera, almost reverent. "He's the CEO. He actually owns this place." His live stream comments began to scroll faster. "No way. Unreal. This is history." Mia froze, her eyes wide, not with shock, but with recognition. She'd suspected something, but hearing it confirmed cracked her open. She exhaled, almost relieved. "I knew it," she whispered. Nicole stumbled back a step, her voice failing before it found volume again. "No, no, this is ridiculous. He's lying." But the denial rang hollow. Too many phones, too many witnesses. Marcus didn't need to argue. He simply lifted his phone again, speaker glowing. "Carla, confirm my credentials to the cabin." The reply was immediate, clinical. "Marcus Reed, CEO of Horizon Airlines, majority shareholder, identity confirmed, authority absolute." The silence that followed was deafening. The insult had flipped, the narrative inverted. And now, the crew wasn't facing a passenger. They were facing their employer. The cabin dissolved into chaos the instant Carla's voice confirmed the truth. "Marcus Reed, CEO of Horizon Airlines, majority shareholder." The words hung in the recycled air like thunder rolling through the fuselage. Nicole staggered back, her lips moving but no sound escaping. The manager's jaw slackened, his clipboard lowering uselessly to his side. Passengers erupted, some gasped, some laughed in disbelief. Others muttered, "I knew it." Every phone was up now, red lights flashing like a constellation of judgment. Keith's live stream comments scrolled faster than he could read. "He's the CEO? They're finished. This is unreal." One viewer typed in all caps, "We're watching history in real time." The gray-suited passenger who had taunted Marcus earlier turned pale. His smirk vanished, his glass of champagne trembling in his hand. "Wait, you're serious?" he muttered. But it was less a question and more a realization. Mia's chest rose and fell with adrenaline. She stepped closer to Marcus, no longer trembling, her voice steady for the first time. "Sir, I knew your ticket was valid. I knew something was wrong." She swallowed hard, glancing toward Nicole. "I'm sorry they treated you this way." Nicole snapped back to life, her denial frantic. This is a setup. He's manipulating you all. You can't just—" Marcus cut her off without raising his voice. "I don't have to manipulate anyone. The evidence is in your actions, your words, your arrogance." His gaze swept across the cabin, unhurried but searing. "You thought I didn't belong. You thought silence meant weakness. What it meant was opportunity, and you gave me everything I needed." The manager's hands shook as he fumbled with the intercom, his voice brittle. "All staff, disregard prior announcements. Resume standard service." But it was too late. The passengers weren't listening to him anymore. They were listening to the man in 1 ampere. Marcus stood fully now, phone still in his hand but no longer needed. His presence alone anchored the cabin. "Every insult was recorded," he said calmly. "Every denial, every torn voucher, every threat. Compliance has the full log." Gasps rippled again. A man in row 5 whispered to his wife, "They're finished. You can't come back from this." Nicole's voice cracked as she tried to salvage control. We can explain, sir. It was a misunderstanding." Marcus didn't blink. "A misunderstanding is forgetting a drink order. What you did was deliberate. You judged. You dismissed. You humiliated. Not because of policy, but because of prejudice." The silence that followed was heavier than turbulence. Nicole's shoulders slumped, the manager's clipboard slid from his grasp, and the entire crew stood frozen, caught in the spotlight of truth. And all around them, witnesses once passive now sat straighter, their phones raised higher, recording the collapse of arrogance in real time. For the crew, the flight was no longer about service. It was survival, and Marcus Reed held every card. The weight of silence pressed harder than the cabin air. Nicole's face had gone pale, the manager's hands trembling as if the clipboard he dropped had carried his authority with it. Every passenger was watching, phones raised, waiting for what came next. Marcus Reed didn't pace, didn't shout. He simply raised his phone once more, his voice steady. "Carla, execute termination protocol, effective immediately." The reply was instant, clinical, inescapable. "Confirmed, sir. Nicole Harper, senior attendant terminated. David Klein, cabin manager terminated. Access revoked. Credentials locked." At that very moment, their ID badges lit red, a faint buzz sounding as the system deactivated them mid-flight. Nicole gasped, clutching at the badge like it could be revived. David staggered, his authority dissolving in front of 24 witnesses. Passengers erupted not in fear but in applause. Keith's live stream captured it all, his voice shaking with disbelief. "They're fired, right here, midair. He actually did it." Comments flooded. "Justice served. About time. Power moves only." Mia stood frozen, wide-eyed, until Marcus's gaze settled on her. Not harsh, not cold steady. "You told the truth when no one else would," he said quietly, but every row heard it. "That matters." Relief broke across her face, tears threatening but held back as she nodded once. Nicole tried one last desperate plea, her voice cracking. "Please, Mr. Reed, I was only following procedure." Marcus turned toward her, his expression unreadable but his tone final. "Procedure doesn't tear vouchers. Procedure doesn't call passengers frauds. That was you, and now it's over." The cabin thundered with another round of applause, louder this time, not for vengeance, but for justice. For the crew, the flight was already over. For Marcus Reed, it was only the beginning of a lesson they would never forget. The echoes of applause slowly faded, leaving only the hum of the engines and the weight of what had just unfolded. Nicole sat frozen in the jump seat, her badge dark, her authority gone. The manager slumped beside her, eyes vacant, staring at the floor he no longer ruled. Marcus Reed returned to his seat with unhurried steps, the untouched tray of bread and water still waiting for him like a relic of arrogance. He set it aside, his calm presence commanding more respect than any uniform in the aisle. Passengers whispered to one another, their words a mixture of awe and disbelief. He fired them, in real time. I've never seen anything like it. That's justice. Phones were still raised, but now the angles captured not just humiliation, they captured restoration. Mia approached cautiously, still uncertain despite Marcus's earlier words. "Sir, is there anything you'd like me to do?" Her voice carried both fear and newfound pride. Marcus shook his head gently. "You've already done what mattered. You told the truth." His words were quiet, but in the silence of the cabin, they resonated like a verdict. He glanced once around the rows faces of strangers who had laughed, doubted, filmed, and finally witnessed. Then his gaze settled forward, steady and unshaken. "Power doesn't need to shout," he said, his tone measured, each word deliberate. "It only needs the truth. Remember that." The cabin held its breath. Even the engines seemed quieter. And then, slowly, passengers began to nod, some clapping, some simply lowering their phones in respect. Marcus Reed leaned back into his seat, eyes calm, as if the storm had passed. But the lesson remained, etched into every witness. Dignity cannot be denied, and silence is not surrender. Justice had taken flight, and no one on board would forget it.